The series Impossible Heir begins with Tae-oh finding himself at a crime scene, holding a weapon, but he doesn't remember anything about what happened. Then, the scene shifts to years ago when we see Tae-oh moving to a small town, his mother's old hometown. He finds a place to stay, and that night, from his house, he can see what happens in a nearby mansion. People are partying outside, while a man stays inside, looking out from the window. The next day, Tae-oh goes around looking for a job but gets rejected because he's underage. He meets the guy who looked out of the window the day before and he is stealing some snacks from a convenience store, but the owner doesn't say anything. Tae-oh finally gets a job at a restaurant. When he gets out, he again sees the stealing guy. Tae-oh sees him again outside of a hardware store, but this time, he approaches Tae-oh to brag about why he's stealing. But no one in town does anything because he is Kang In-ha, the illegitimate son of the Kang-oh group's chairman. However, Tae-oh sees that the people in town just ignore him because all the things he took were worthless, and In-ha just wants attention. In-ha is clearly upset. The next day, Tae-oh is placed in the same class with In-ha. The teacher introduces Tae-oh as the one who scored in the top 0.1% nationwide on the university entrance mock test. At lunch, In-ha starts to bully Tae-oh. He doesn't let the other guy sit and throws food at him. But Tae-oh doesn't back down and hits him right back. They end up fighting in the canteen until the teacher arrives and scolds them. After the fight, they both have to stay at school to fill out a letter of apology for fighting. The teacher let both of them go, but In-ha's friend comes to tell them the news and lies, saying that only In-ha can leave. In-ha acts cocky about it but later feels ashamed when he learns the truth and drives off. He returns to his family mansion, where his half-brother In-ju is showing off his shooting skills and having fun with his girlfriends. Later, the teacher comes in and tells Tae-oh to go home. As he's leaving, someone calls him, and he rushes to see his mom at a monastery, who is disguised as a monk. It turns out that the person who called him was his stepdad, who had been put in jail for murdering his mom. But now, he knows that Tae-oh's mom is still alive and that they framed him. The stepdad knows where they are and sends people to kill Tae-oh's mom. As his mom is about to leave on a bus, a group of thugs starts to search the area. After that, Tae-oh goes to the boxing club and considers signing up because he wants to be stronger to protect his mom. In-ha happens to be a member of the club and asks if Tae-oh wants to learn boxing to beat him up. Tae-oh ignores his question and walks away, but In-ha tells him that he will teach Tae-oh if he can beat him just once. They get in the ring, and In-ha quickly knocks Tae-oh to the ground. Tae-oh has a flashback of his stepdad and the times he abused him and his mom. All of this anger fuels him, and he gets up and punches In-ha non-stop until he realizes it was just an illusion. Somehow, this fight makes In-ha and Tae-oh become friends. The next day at school, when someone makes fun of Tae-oh for his dad being a murderer, In-ha sticks up for him. While doing so, he compares the social differences between his dad and his friend's dad to insult him. Tae-oh isn't impressed by that and leaves for the rooftop, with In-ha following him. On the rooftop, Tae-oh shares his family secret with In-ha and suggests a plan that could help both of them climb the social ladder to reach the highest level of power. Years later, Tae-oh and In-ha are in college, ending up at the same university. Tae-oh is working hard at different jobs to support himself, including tutoring and warehouse loading, and come back home early in the morning. He now lives in a small apartment across the street from a girl named Hae-won. At home, In-ha hires a private chef and throws a birthday party for Tae-oh, while Tae-oh helps In-ha with his studies. In-ha informs him that he has recommended Tae-oh to be the math tutor for his little sister as a birthday gift. At the university, Tae-oh is called in to receive compliments on his report that outlines future strategies for the Kangho Company. The project is based on the Co-Prosperity Cooperation Center, a hub for investing in and acquiring startups, with a main focus on mergers and acquisitions. The professor offers to buy it, but Tae-oh decides to keep it for the future instead. After Tae-oh leaves, the professor still calls someone to talk about the project. That person is Jung-ju, another half-brother of In-ha. In the library, Tae-oh learns that In-ju and Jung-ju are competing to be the successor of the Kangho group and starts thinking of a plan. At that moment, he sees Hae-won, who is also studying in the library. Hae-won approaches him at the vending machine, introduces herself, and tells him to stop ignoring her. In-ha arrives, and they have lunch together. He notices that Tae-oh is interested in Hae-won, but Tae-oh denies it. Later that day, Tae-oh goes to tutor Hee-ju, In-ha's little sister. Hee-ju isn't focused on studying and is more interested in her new tutor instead. That evening, when he returns home, Tae-oh sees Hae-won's mom breaking the door and nagging her daughter for money. He then sees Haiwon sadly walking on the street and follows her with an umbrella when it starts to rain. He asks her to have a beer together, and they have a talk for the first time. The next day, Mr. Kong, the chairman of Kango Group, asked his assistant to report on his son's actions to consider who will become the successor. His second son, Song-ju, seems to have more potential than his older brother, In-ju, who only cares about partying. Meanwhile, Geometry Suk, Mr. Kang's wife and the biological mother of Song-ju and Hee-ju, is scheming with her son to win the succession game. She gets In-ha to sign away his rights to the company shares, otherwise, he will be cut off from his financial support, but little does she know, it is a part of Tae-oh and In-ha's plan. Later, In-ha and Tae-oh plan to hang out, but In-ha meets Haiwon and invites her over. They later go to In-ha's house. And In-ha blatantly asks her to date him. She turns him down, saying she's too busy to date. Tae-oh is uneasy with In-ha hitting on his crush but doesn't say anything. Later, Haiwon and Tae-oh leave together. They are on the bus but sit in two different places. Haiwon texts Tae-oh to ask him to go with her to an old place she lived. She feels they're alike and thinks Tae-oh is using In-ha to get ahead, and she wants to do the same. She asks if Tae-oh would help her. Meanwhile, In-ha goes to Tae-oh's house and sees that neither of them is home. Tae-oh rejects Haiwon's request, and she tells him it's okay as long as he doesn't get in her way. Tae-oh doesn't say anything and leaves. He comes back home and finds In-ha eating ramen noodles in his house. The next day, at the lunch table, Hee-ju asks if In-ha can come to their house over the weekend. All members of the Kong family disrespect In-ha except for Hee-ju, who really cares about him. In-ju scolds her, but she tells him to shut up and asks her dad again. Mr. Kong finally agrees with his daughter's request, while Geometry Suk isn't happy about it. She later complains to Mr. Kong about that, but he tells her that he doesn't need her permission. He also reveals that he already knows about her forcing In-ha to sign the inheritance waiver. He then calls In-ha and ignores her being discontent. Geometry Suk throws In-ha's inheritance waiver in front of Mr. Kang's face, and he realizes that his assistant, who is also his lawyer, has betrayed him. However, Mr. Kong gives the assistant a chance and tells him to take care of their new subsidiary named Milton and to keep In-ha's inheritance waiver safe. Meanwhile, In-ha and Tae-oh are surprised by Mr. Kang's invitation. Being invited to the Kang's house was entirely within Tae-oh's plan, but he didn't expect it to happen so quickly. Tae-oh supposed that the reason he invited In-ha was to warn his wife after she did things behind his back. Tae-oh tells In-ha to act innocent but not naive when he goes there and to lower the family's guard around him. Song-ju meets with Professor Dong-uk, Tae-oh's professor, to discuss the Co-Prosperity Cooperation Center. Dong-uk pretends it was his idea, and Song-ju offered him to become the project director. Hee-ju skips her tutoring session to have dinner with In-ha. During their call she reveals that it was her suggestion to invite him over. In-ha seems disappointed upon hearing this, possibly hoping that his father had invited him out of some affection, but it turns out he was just accepting his daughter's wish. At the restaurant, the server turns out to be Haiwon, who is working there part-time. When Hee-ju learns that Haiwon is In-ha's friend and also knows Tae-oh, she playfully teases Haiwon. However, Haiwon hints that she might be interested in Tae-oh as well, leading Hee-ju to sense that there is something off about Haiwon. After escorting Hee-ju home, In-ha returns inside and tells Haiwon he wants to wait for her, but Haiwon rejects him again. The next day, Kong arrives at the Kong residence and enters. In-ju sees him and immediately insults In-ha. Hee-ju appears and defends In-ha. When In-ju points a finger at her, she bites him, causing him to drop a bottle of wine and alert everyone. Geometry Suk comes in and blames all the mess on In-ha, threatening him to leave. Later, the housekeeper informs Mr. Kong about what happened. After being kicked out of the Kong house, In-ha meets with Tae-oh at the beach. Tae-oh comforts In-ha and tells him that their plan is going well, as Tae-oh's professor and Song-ju are progressing with the cooperation center just as they expected. Hee-ju is upset at the dinner because no one seems to care that In-ha left after being mistreated. She goes to her room, and Geometrical Suk follows her. At the table, Mr. Kong lectures In-ju for disrespecting him by insulting the guest he had invited. Geometry Suk slaps Hee-ju's face and tells her to learn to behave, that makes her decide to run away. Later, Geometry Suk also finds out that Hee-ju's tutor is a friend of In-ha's. While running away from home, Hee-ju calls Tae-oh. She goes for a run and lies down on the track as Tae-oh comes to see her. After a while, they meet Haiwon, and then In-ha comes to pick Hee-ju up. She doesn't want to go with him until In-ha convinces everyone else to join them. Here, Hee-ju learns that Tae-oh and Hae-won live across from each other and feels something off about it. In-ha drops Hee-ju off at home, and she's cheerful again after seeing Tae-oh. The next day, she's angry to learn that Tae-oh has been fired and that she'll have another tutor. Hee-ju pretends to go to school but gets off in the middle of the street and goes to Tae-oh's university. She confesses her feelings to him, but he rejects her, saying that they are only employer and employee. Hee-ju tries to act tough but cries on the way back home. Meanwhile, Hae-won meets Tae-oh in the library and suggests that he might have been too harsh with Hee-ju earlier and that maintaining a good relationship with her could be beneficial for him. However, Tae-oh ignores her advice and leaves. Meanwhile, In-ha, who has been eavesdropping behind a curtain, starts to question Hae-won's motives. Elsewhere, Hae-won's mother works at an illegal gambling bar. She notices the owners counting a large sum of money, so she steals some and runs away. The following day, the owners visit Hae-won's class to demand their money back. Hae-won stands her ground and leaves, but they follows and hit her. Hae-won hit them back, and when thing gets worse, Tae-oh shows up and protects her. The guard arrives, kicks the loan sharks out, but he threatens Hae-won to see her at home. Tae-oh takes Hae-won to a classroom and urges her to run away, as it's no longer safe for her to go home. She explains she's used to such incidents and refuses to hide because doing so would mean acknowledging her mother as family. In-ha learns about Hae-won being targeted by loan sharks and becomes worried. He tries to call her, but she intentionally ignores his calls. In a state of panic, In-ha searches for her, and when he finds Hae-won, he kisses her. Tae-oh, already leaving the school but can't stop worrying about Hae-won, decides to come back and finds them together. Tae-oh is upset by the relationship between Hae-won and In-ha. While on his way home, he encounters Hae-won, who is about to move in with In-ha. In that moment, Tae-oh loses his composure and begs Hae-won not to leave, expressing his wish for a future with her. However, Hae-won states that being together would be a mistake and it wouldn't improve their situations. Upon returning home, Tae-oh is surprised when Hae-won comes back and stands at his door. However, at that moment, In-ha calls him. Tae-oh decides to answer his friend's call instead, allowing Hae-won to leave. 5 years later, the Co-Prosperity Cooperation Center has become a success. In-ha is just one of their employees. Mr. Kong still looks down on him and considers him insignificant. Tae-oh's former university professor, now the director of the center, introduces Tae-oh as another employee to the Kongo Group's executive council.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like for more videos like this.